Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Employee to Boss podcast. I am your host, Haley Hayhurst, the owner of Espresso Podcast Production, a full-service podcast agency specializing in editing, marketing, and strategy. And today I am here with a very special guest, April Roberts. She is the owner of Vixen Gathering, and she helps Gen X women achieve more abundance, love, spirituality, and alignment by connecting with their femininity. As a high-achieving former attorney and financial advisor with degrees from Vanderbilt and Notre Dame, April understands the societal pressures facing women that often lead to burnout. She hosts the podcast Vixen Voice, which we talk about how she uses that to grow her business in this episode. But she hosts that podcast where she shares stories of Gen X women that have shed the traditional definition of success to pursue their true life's passion. During this episode, we talk about time management, becoming a high-earning woman, setting your hourly rate and how that relates to the rest of your life and how you think about the tasks that you have to do in your day-to-day life. We talk about paying yourself and focusing on the things that will make you the most revenue in your business to avoid burnout. So if you're someone who loves to make schedules for yourself or someone who struggles to make schedules for yourself, like I have a hard time blocking, but this episode really puts it into perspective of how that can change my business. So it is something that since this interview I have started doing. So we talk about making your schedule to avoid burnout, maximizing your time, and getting to that six figures and what that really can mean for your business and life. We also talk about how time really equals energy. And so if you're putting your time into something, you're really putting your energy into it as well. And so making sure that everything feels aligned and really good to you is important. So this episode is super powerful and April has a lot of value to share. So let's get right into this episode with April Roberts. Hey, April, thank you so much for joining me on the Employee to Boss podcast. I am so excited to be speaking with you today.
Hi, Haley. Thanks so much for having me. I'm honored. I'm excited about our topic today.
Me too. Time is very, very important, and we're going to get all into it. So if you wanted to start off by introducing yourself and telling us about your journey from employee to boss, the audience would love to know what you do.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you. So I am now in my fourth career, I like to joke. And somehow I just ended up starting two side hustles on top of my new business. So I'm kind of a serial entrepreneur. Yeah. Everybody's like, hey, did you just join this like company to sell like chemical free products? I'm like, yeah, it was kind of an accident, but I really like it. So anyway, we'll go back. I did start out, I'm from Biloxi, Mississippi originally, and I just read a lot and my parents encouraged me to experience a lot. I was really blessed as a child. I think my parents could see that I was very curious about things and they fostered that curiosity. And so because of that, I kind of knew, okay, at 18, I'm out of here, right? Like there's a whole world out there. And it's really interesting, because I came from the Mississippi Gulf Coast. And in general, I mean, this has changed. But when I was growing up, like people didn't leave Mississippi. I remember the college counselor saying, well, do you have family elsewhere? Like they couldn't understand why you would want to leave. And like I said, I was just blessed that I had a family that knew that and supported it and, really encouraged me to look. So I kind of did the normal path most of us have taken to be successful. And that's, go to a good college or a college that's right for what you want to do. And so I went to Vanderbilt University undergrad. And I remember near the end when I was a communication major, which I was just talking to another comm major from Vanderbilt, and it's funny because our major was 48 hours. It was the pre-law major. Like we studied rhetoric, persuasion. Like it was not an easy major, but I loved it. But, it wasn't broadcasting. It wasn't journalism. So people didn't really understand what we were doing. So long story short, at the end of that, I was like, oh, I want to get my PhD in communications and help like scientists and engineers communicate better, right? Because I feel like there are all these super intelligent people out there that have a hard time like verbalizing what they do. And my parents were just like, no. Because my dad was the first person in my family to go to school, so for them to be putting me through a school like that, they were like, you're gonna get out and make money. So I ended up going to law school instead at Notre Dame. And then I did get out and I made six figures at 25, right? I started at a law firm as a litigator, and I worked 80 hours a week for my six figures. And I just thought that was how life was. Like, I was getting paid well. I lived in the best part of town. I drove a nice car. And I was like, well, you work hard and you get to buy things. And, I think it's just because many of us, our parents grew up in the status generation, and that's what was important, right? And so when we first get out, that's the same thinking we have. And some of us get out of it earlier. Some of us take until our 30s, 40s, 50s to get out of it, which honestly, Haley, which is why my new company focuses on Gen X women.
Mhm.
So, really I really say age 40 to 65, because there are women recreating their careers at all ages, right? So anyway, that was like my backstory. I kind of did what I thought was successful and what was going to bring me happiness. And I just kind of woke up one day. Well, what happened was I fell in love with my ex-husband. You have another person in your life and you're like, okay, I never get to see him. The partner, who makes very good money, answers my emails at 3 a.m. in the morning. Like, is this the future I want when I'm 40 something years old, right? Which now, being in my late 40s, it's so funny to think about that. But, as a 27-year-old, this is my thinking. And so what happened was we moved to Italy because my husband was Italian. I couldn't have a career there, which was challenging for an A-type personality like me who'd always gone the next step, right? And so I ended up teaching English to professionals and lawyers, which was a blessing because it taught me how to listen well. And if you've never actually had a job that requires you to listen, it is a skill and it is exhausting at first, right? And so, long story short, I did that and I worked for other people and I didn't make a lot of money, but it gave me something to do and got me out of the house. And then when I ended up back in the US, first with my ex-husband, of course, first thing I did was get another job because that's what I know. I got a law job pretty quickly. We moved back to Italy, and long story short, we ended up getting divorced. He had addiction issues, and I was just a broken person. And I remember ending up back at my parents' house in Mississippi, which I wanted to leave at 18. I'm 32, going, what's next? I have $10,000 in the bank account and like no prospects, right? And I've sold everything I own. Right. And again, and I share this story because sometimes what seems to be our darkest hours are greatest blessings. So if anyone's going through a tough time who's listening, I never really had stopped and thought, what do I want? Like, what fills my soul? I just was always going to the next step, right? And it was easy for me to get jobs with my resume and where I went to school. So it was always easy to go get a corporate law job, and they paid me pretty well. But at this moment, I found I had to put myself back together emotionally, spiritually, mentally, and even physically. I had lost a ton of weight and, just going through the stress. And I didn't feel like I had 150% like I wanted to give if somebody hired me to do a job. And so my integrity wouldn't allow me to do that. So I would go for walks every day. And one day I just said, okay, send it to me. And long story short, I saw what my dad was doing, which was financial planning. And I said, hey, Dad, why don't I come to your dinner seminars and seat people and set appointments for you? I just thought it'd be fun, right? And I really loved it. And next thing I knew, I was getting licensed and I was my dad's intern for a year and a half. And again, this is about age 33 when I started out at a big firm making six figures at 25. So sometimes you really do have to fully start over for life purposes, or maybe because you choose to. But I knew my soul was calling me to show up in a different way. I always wanted to serve people. And as a corporate lawyer, that, you really just talk to other lawyers, which most of my friends are lawyers, no big deal. But I just really wanted to serve people in a different way. And so I started the retirement planning business with my dad, where we helped people plan for a bright future, which was so much greater.
Yeah. Wow. What a journey you went on there. That's really, I like how all of those things, you went through very high highs and low lows, and
Yes.
ultimately ended up where you are teaching Gen X women about achieving love, spirituality,
Yeah.
confidence, time management. How did you get to that point? Like what was the
And being
pivotal moment?
abundant.
Right.
The key part, yes. No, great question. So, 2008 was when I started with my dad. Again, I worked with him as his intern for a year and a half because I knew nothing about the financial business. So, I literally, it was just my dad was almost retired. So, it was him and I. So, like, I did everything but the financial planning and closing the sale to get new clients, right? But I sat in every meeting with him. So, I mean, I'm working,
Mm.
you know, if you're listening and you have a job and a side hustle, you can understand this. I mean, I was doing like annuity applications on my sofa at 9 o'clock at night watching TV because, like, you can't get everything done in a day. And it's just kind of your life for a while, right? And I wanted to learn everything so I could serve people properly. And then I moved to Houston and opened my own business. And that's, you know, a whole nother beast where you're literally in charge of everything. And first thing was to hire an assistant part time and then build the team from there. So I think that was 2010. Fast forward to 2023 when I exited that firm for multiple seven figures. So, you know,
Mm.
I've been on that journey of growing something from like literally nothing to be able to exit and help hundreds of families along the way, right? So, a lot of times we focus on how you start and where you end up, but like the journey is the beautiful part. So, to answer your
Yeah.
question, 2017, I started getting called to do something different and it would just creep up. It was this vision I had, and then it came back in 2019, and then it came back April 2020. Now, remember April 2020, right? The stock market had just crashed. I'm a retirement planner. I have a team that we suddenly had to learn how to work remotely. I have hundreds of clients who are freaking out about the end of the world, and my parents work with me.
Oh
So
my
I
gosh.
just,
You're
right?
like cherry on top.
Yeah, I just remember looking up and saying, really, right now? You want me to do this right now? And so that was the beginning. You know, as a financial advisor, I had strategic partners that coached me how to run a business because many of us are very good at what we do, but we don't know how to run a business. And so that was a blessing. And part of it was, you know, Monday was spent with my team, like having team meetings, wearing my CEO hat, in the afternoon preparing for my meetings the week. And then Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, I saw clients and prospective clients. And Friday was like catch up day. And if I caught up, I didn't work all day, right? And so that was my first introduction to time and energy management. Because if you think about it, you know, walking someone through a financial plan or talking to them about investing their lifetime savings takes a lot different energy than talking to your marketing team, right? And
Right.
so when you're a small business, you wear all these hats. So, what I learned was to wear the different hats on different days. And that really helped my energy management because I would put cluster activities that were like energy pools so that, you know, it's not just time management, but how am I showing up best for everyone?
Yeah, and that's great advice because I used to accept meetings every single day, 5 days a week. And I
Yeah.
was like, there's no, like, I'm a very social person. I could talk
Uh,
to anyone.
Me too.
But I'm like, if I am focused on a task and then I have to switch into my extrovert hat, that's just not going to be it. So that's really interesting how, you started off working 80 hours a week, thought that was normal, and then
Yeah.
moved to Italy, didn't have a job for a while. So it's
Yeah.
quite a shift there. And one of the things you mentioned just a moment ago was there wasn't enough time in the day to do everything you wanted to do when you
Correct.
were in wealth management, in retirement plans. So I'm curious, like, how did you solve, you've been to both extremes. What advice do you have on time and managing our time and like prioritizing what really matters?
That's a great question. And you know, if we go forward, March of 2020, I had this calling to start what is now the Vixen gathering. I had no idea what it was in March of 20 or April 2020. And you know, I still had my wealth management firm and in 2020 because of situations, I started our own security firm to support our financial planning firm too. So I literally had three companies that I was running plus I was chief compliance officer. So, you know, I went back to that that same thing. Okay. Monday through Wednesday, I wear the Roberts Wealth Management hat. Thursday and Friday, I get to work on Vixen, talk about to potential clients for that. And, then I moved it up where it was like noon Wednesday as I started getting things off my plate. And so you have to start somewhere, and you can kind of creep it along.
How do we schedule our calendar? Like when
Yeah.
you have all of these things that we need to look at and it's overwhelming,
Yeah.
what does it look like to actually like do you advise putting it on your
Yep.
calendar? What's the advice there?
That's a great question. Now it's interesting because I was never a morning person, and this is just an example. And when I was in wealth management, I noticed everyone who I admired, that's important, and who was successful, right? But like you liked their lifestyle, you liked who they were as a person, etc., that they all got up early. So I trained myself to get up earlier because in my mind successful people got up early, right? And now I'm very spiritual, so I really like that time in the morning for prayer and meditation. So I now wake up at like 4:46 in the morning. I know it's a funny time, but I have this weird thing about odd numbers, and it helps me for it not to be an exact time to not hit the snooze
Yeah.
button. That's me, right? Like whatever hack works. And so anyway, bottom line is I'm now like baked and done by 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Like for me to do a coaching session past 4 in the afternoon, the client is not getting the best of me. And I share that because we all have to look at our biorhythms. I think the first thing to time management is being honest with yourself. Hey, I'm really great at this time. I'm not so great at this time, because especially as a small business owner or trying to start one, you have a lot of shoulds. I should do this. I should do that. Like I said, I thought I should get up early because that's what I saw successful people doing. Now I love waking up early, so I embrace that, right? But I shift my day. So I work from 7 in the morning to 4. My team works from 8:30 to 4:30 or 5 because they have kids they have to get to school, right?
Mhm.
So we have to be honest with ourselves on that, and then you have to be honest about your capacity, and not just capacity, how much time you have in the calendar, but how much energy you have in the tank. Because especially if you're the business owner trying to start something out, if you burn out, like it's done for everyone, and we know how much burnout exists out there. So what I always think back to my legal career where, as a 27-year-old lawyer, I'm making six figures. The firm is billing me out at $250 an hour, I think, right? Like that's what a client was paying for my time. And so I'll never forget, I had never, I had a legal secretary, we had paralegals, but I wasn't used to having people that did things for me. So I hated to ask them to do things, right? So I was making copies one day, and my legal secretary, who was like freaking amazing, she was like, "What are you doing?" Like she treated me like her daughter, like a slap on the hand. And I was like, "Well, I'm making copies. You were busy. I just thought I'd handle it." And she goes, "The client pays you $250 an hour. They don't pay me per hour. Who do you think the client wants making these copies?" Right? And so that was the first aha to me that everyone has a lane and there's a reason for the lane, right? And so if you think about that, you have to know your hourly rate as the business owner, and you're going to have multiple hourly rates. You're going to have the hourly rate you bring into the firm. So like in my financial firm, it was probably about $2,400 a month, an hour that I brought into the firm revenue wise, right? That wasn't how much I personally made, but then I also knew based on what I could take home, what my personal income hourly rate was. So the personal income hourly rate helps you manage your personal life, and the revenue rate helps you manage your business, right? So let's say I have someone in charge of my calendar and they have to make sure Zoom links are in, or the link for this because, I'm so excited to be on here with you. Well, if I'm bringing in $2,400 for the business and they bring in, 100, who should be putting that Zoom link in the calendar? Does that make sense? Like my time should be spent on the higher revenue generating activities. And I know money's not everything, but it's also if you're the rainmaker, if you're the relationship builder, like where should your time best be spent, and be honest with that. Now, the personal income is important for the home because in the US, we have a lot of guilt about delegating things at home. It's really interesting because in other countries, this doesn't exist, right? So let's say you're bringing home $100 an hour and a housekeeper is going to cost you $50 an hour. Well, that's a no brainer because you also get paid $100 to rest. Does that make
Mhm.
sense?
Yeah, totally. That does make a lot of sense. And thinking of this, you've managed multiple businesses at once
Hmm.
before. And so a lot of the entrepreneurs who are listening to this might be solo entrepreneurs, or they might
Yeah.
be very small teams, or maybe they're still in corporate and they are starting their side hustle. So, thinking about having two priorities or managing multiple clients in my case, it has taken me a long time to get to the point where I know, like, from this hour to this hour, it's client work. I block off
Yeah.
hours for my own business. I block off my lunch on my calendar. I block out my workouts on my calendar. But I'm almost 4 years in business at this point. So it's just been
Hmm.
taking me this process. So for anyone who is newer in entrepreneurship and is trying to manage all of these things on their own, what advice do you have?
I'd say from the beginning, time blocking color code your calendar. And you can do this in many ways. There's so many calendar systems out there. I really just like Google Calendar for the electronic version. I
Mhm.
still keep a handwritten planner. I use Brendan Bouchard's high performance planner. I'm a certified high performance coach. Here's why my electronic calendar rules, but to plan my week, which I do the Friday before because I don't work at all on Sunday. Like, I don't even want to plan the week on Sunday. So I do the
Yeah.
Friday before. I'm looking ahead to the electronic calendar and I'm physically writing it on, everything that's scheduled on my hand planner. Well, every morning I take time to review the physical calendar, my hand planner, and I designate the top 3 things I have to do that day. And then I have a laundry to do list over here of things that have to be done that day. But I want to focus on my top 3 needle movers, right? And then what I do is I have the scheduled appointments and I'll go work all that stuff in between the scheduled appointments on my planner. So, I mean, I'll plan like the whole year is mapped on my calendar right now for 2024. And so this week I had scheduled to look at second quarter and make sure it still looks good. And then, like I said, each week I'm looking at the next week and each day I'm looking at that day. So time management takes time. I mean,
Yeah.
that's the funny part of it, unless you're lucky and you get this amazing executive assistant that can read your mind and the complexity of your life and do it all. If so, hang on to that person because they're super valuable. But usually that's the hardest part for people to understand, the reality of your life, the reality of what brings you energy. And so you kind of ultimately have to be responsible for the design of your calendar, if that makes sense, right? Other
Yeah.
people can put the details in when you have a team, but you know what works best. And to answer your question, I had a client in my small group coaching. So that's my first tier program for aspiring entrepreneurs and startups to help them get to 6 figures quickly. And she was basically, staying at home because they had moved to another city because her husband had a great job and she wanted to start a business. So she literally had nothing on her calendar. I said, I don't care. Walking the dog is one color, cleaning the house is another color, working on your business is another color. And once she time blocked her calendar, she had been depressed before that. And honestly, she suddenly was excited. She was moving forward on her business and doing all these things. We as humans, we like security and knowing what we're doing. Now, we want freedom if you're an entrepreneur too. That's why I like color coding the calendar because you can see in 2 seconds if you're doing what you're supposed to or not, right? Like you want to
Yeah.
glance. Yeah.
Absolutely. And what you just said is I've been thinking about this a lot lately where corporate businesses, big businesses, they don't plan like Q1 and Q1. They are planning ahead. They might be like
Yes.
a year ahead, months ahead, at least a quarter ahead. And I think as entrepreneurs, we are very like on the fly, especially for me
Yes.
because I'm a service provider. So editing people's podcasts. So once I get a new client, I have to work that into my schedule.
Right.
And it can be very on the fly. But I have been trying to think, quarters ahead. What am I launching in this quarter? What's my priority of that
Yeah.
quarter? When you're new in business and you don't know what's going on, it's hard. It's really, really hard to even like expect to know what you're going to do next week.
Well, you have to give yourself grace when you're new. And so, one thing I like to do is I overlay in April's ideal calendar. And this is super valuable as you build a team because, I still, just like my financial business, Monday morning spent meeting with my team, my strategic partners, like kind of that CEO hats on, right? And then the afternoon, I have a couple hours for coaching or sales calls. And then all day Tuesday, Wednesday, that's it, or podcast guesting. So my calendar literally says April coaching / prospective meetings, and it has a block. And then when the calendar fills, we just remove that block. So
Mhm.
one, it's really so my team knows when to schedule, but I like it because it holds me accountable because I would burn myself out and be like, oh, you want to talk to me about being a prospective client? Yes, I have time Friday at 6 o'clock, right? When I intuitively know I am good for no one Friday at 6 o'clock, right? Like
Oh
I'm
my gosh.
not
Yeah.
giving
I'm
someone
like,
value.
if it's before 10 a.m. or after 6 p.m., my brain is off. Like,
Yeah.
that is not
So
the time I want to
that's
be.
your power time, right? And
Yeah.
how are you best using it? So, I mean, I would argue it's really important as a new business, even if you way over or undershoot it, set a revenue goal and then start thinking, what is the key activity that's going to get me to that goal? So, here's an example. The coaching industry and mastermind industry is all new to me. I grew a whole business in financial planning. I had mastered that marketing. I knew exactly how to hit the gas if we wanted more leads, right? Or lower the spend if we didn't want more. This is all new. So I've had a crash course in a year. So I have tried a lot of things that didn't work. I've spent a lot of money that didn't make anything for me, right? So be careful, make sure it's within your realm of being able to afford. So now we finally have a good answer, so we're overhauling our marketing. Well, in the meantime, I have programs that need to be filled, so I've gone back old school where I'm reaching out to 5 people every day.
Hmm.
And I was actually on a coaching session with Natalie Ellis of Boss Babes, if you know Boss Babes, and she was like, "Okay, what's your goal?" And I said, okay, I'm doing 25 direct reach outs a week. And she was like, awesome, April. That's great, right? This is someone running a like 8-figure business. And she said, I get back to basics all the time. So sometimes we beat ourselves up thinking, I don't know what I'm doing. It's really easy for you to tell 5 people a day about your business. What if that's like your first metric, right? Or, to pitch 3 times a week. Like, keep it very, very simple. Set that revenue goal and say, okay, what are the activities that are going to get me to this revenue goal? Narrow it down to the top 3 and then narrow it down to the top 1 and hold yourself
Hmm.
accountable and make sure there is time on your calendar or you will not do that repeatable habit.
Oh, absolutely. That's great advice right there. I really love that. And getting back to what you said in the very beginning of time and energy
Mm-hmm.
management, kind of being like
Yeah.
one and the same to avoid burnout, to really optimize your activities. What is it that you see the connection between time and energy being?
Well, I've always said, like, my team used to laugh at my wealth management firm. I was like, I'm an energy broker. This is what I do all day. And, like, my peer planner was like, you have so many hacks. I was like, you have to, because I mean, to be a business owner, you almost have to be a superhero to get all this stuff done, right? And you definitely don't operate like the average person out there, and you need to get it out of your head and quit comparing yourself to your neighbors, your friends, etc., unless they're in business too. That's why if you can find like a networking group, a mastermind, something, like these are your people and these are the people that maybe you can mimic or, compare yourself to. I'm always against comparison. But, at the end of the day, if you're out of energy, you're not getting anything done, period. And One thing I know about entrepreneurs is they usually want to bring value. They have high integrity. They want to show up and do a good job and be proud of what they do. Well, if you have a head cold or you're under the weather, you're showing up at like 50% that day, right? We want to operate at 100+%. And so the key to that is being rested, knowing your body, knowing the activities that give you energy. Like you talked about being an extrovert, right, Haley? So that means you get energy from being around people. Well, an introvert rests and restores by being with themselves. So, like, are you an extrovert or an introvert? How do you refill your cup? What's important to you? What's your biorhythm? One thing is, when I trained to be a high performance coach, they recommend 8 to 9 hours of sleep a night. And I sleep 7 to 8. I'm pretty strong on sleep. Like, I love my sleep. And I was like, I'm going to try to sleep 9 hours. Like, I'll test myself all the time, right? And I'm like, let me see what 9 hours is, which of course meant I had to go to bed earlier. I did it for 2 weeks and I was groggy for 4 hours every darn day. Like 9 hours
Mm.
just does not work for me. I operate better on 7 to 8. Some people operate better at 6. Some people need 10. Like, just, again, be careful of comparison. Treat yourself like your own experiment, right? Like, how do I operate best? Do I do better on sales calls first thing in the morning or in the afternoon? Like, do I have power energy midday? And just be aware. And that's why I say, when you set that ideal calendar, we're all idealists and we all think we can do more than we can do. So I really recommend to, at the beginning, review your ideal calendar every month, see if it makes sense and tweak it. Past that, review it every quarter. That's why it was on my calendar for 2 hours to look at the next quarter, right? That's reflection time. Like, hey, is this schedule working for me? So another example is, I have my own podcast. I have to record 8 episodes a month of my own podcast, right? And I love being a guest and meeting amazing people like you, Haley. So I was getting loaded up with podcast guesting, and I finally had to tell my team I can only guest on 4 podcasts a month because it's fun and I love it, but it was stealing time from like coaching, bringing on new clients, etc. So I would really plan ahead and then plan that review time to look back and say, hey, where'd all my time go? And is it being well spent?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And podcasts are a great way to grow your business. I mean, I talk about that all the time on this, but also
Yeah.
if you are like overloading yourself with interviews or trying to get out too many interviews a month, then you still have to have time to promote it. Because if you're recording it, you need people to listen. You need people to
Yes.
know where to go and find it. So definitely, that is what I always think about. Like, if you're doing something for marketing, if you're doing something to grow your business, and let's say you just need to put up a new sales page, right?
Mm-hmm.
How are you going to promote that offer? Do you have time in your calendar to promote it? Or like, what is going on with that part? So this has all been really, really great advice. I've really loved all of the time management, energy management that you've shared so far. I'm curious, in your business now,
Mm-hmm.
Vixen Gathering, what, so you work with Gen X women to achieve more abundance, love, spirituality. What does that program look like? Is it one-on-one? Is it group
Mm-hmm.
coaching?
Great question. So I particularly work with female Gen X entrepreneurs or
Mhm.
aspiring entrepreneurs. So I have 3 tiers of programs. The first tier is a 12-week intensive. And again, that's for the aspiring entrepreneur, the woman with still in corporate with a side hustle, trying to make it full time, or a startup entrepreneur. And our goal is to get you to 6 figures as quickly as we can by things like we're talking about today. How can you be most productive? How can you manage your time? What energy this week with my group, we're talking about energy. Like, what are some energy hacks? And also being really clear on what you want. So it's actually like actionable tips and tools that you put to work each week. And the cool thing is, in my beta group, someone doubled their revenue in 12 weeks. That wasn't the first time I did this. So, I mean, this stuff works. And it's kind of like we're talking about today, just thinking about things differently. It's called Vixen High Performance because I'm a certified high performance coach. And I really think when you go into entrepreneurship, you have to think of yourself like a world-class athlete. Like, how does Haley show up at her best every freaking day, right? Like, how do I set myself up for success? Because as you know, especially at the beginning, like, you are the foundation of everything. And if you get cracks, the whole business is in trouble. So that's kind of first tier, and that's that 12-week intensive small group coaching. I limit to 4 women per group so everyone gets enough attention. Second tier is called my Vixen Mastermind. That was our initial program we started with, and that's helping women go from 6 figures to 7, which I know some of you already said, I never want 7, and talk to me. Life gets much easier above 7 figures, right? You can leverage your time back. You actually get freedom back. Like, it's kind of crazy because I feel many women think they have to sacrifice to get to 7 figures of revenue. And actually, the business gets easier beyond that because you have resources to invest back, right? But the whole point of that is we don't just want to make more money. We want to enjoy our lives more. We want to have more joy. We want to have better relationships with our significant others and families. And so that's kind of all built into that's a year-long program. And we have 4 retreats a year, and the rest of the meetings are virtual. And then I just started, I call it our Jet Setter group, which is for women leading teams doing multiple 7 figures. And so really they want just kind of a sisterhood of other women in the same situation where they can talk about their problems, right? So that's called Jet Setter because we actually mastermind on a private jet for fun because
I
I
love
think you should
that.
have joy in your life. And so, yeah. So
Yes.
that's the different tiers. But the cool thing is, like, next week I have a 3-day challenge for $47. You can get on and raise your money mindset in 3 hours. So we're really passionate about, just helping female entrepreneurs raise not just their mental game, but their spiritual, emotional, and physical game as well, so that they can really enjoy life.
I love that. The jet setter is just such a fun concept because I'm sure a
Yeah.
lot of women are like, "Oh, if I'm going to have like a 7, 8 figure business, this is the life that I want to live." So they're kind
Yeah.
of like embodying it in that moment. I read this book a while ago, kind of off topic, but it was like how to basically like level up your life and your business and make more
Oh, I love it.
connections. And
Yeah.
one of the tips that this man gave was always sit in business class. Like never sit in coach, is that what it's called? He was like always upgrade your seat.
Yeah.
And I was like, what a weird thing. Like, what do you mean? And so I did it once because it wasn't that much more expensive. I was like, let's just try it. And I kid you not, the man sitting next to me became my client. Like, it was the
Yes.
funniest thing. I was judging this book so much. I was like, what do you mean sitting in business class is going to like upgrade my life? What does that mean? And he was right. I need to like write him an apology note or something.
Well, and it raises your mindset. I'll never forget. It's so funny because my best friend now has her own business, but she didn't at the time. And, I had won some trip and I got to bring a +1 and I wasn't
Mm.
dating anyone. So I was like, hey, do you want to go to Prague with me? And she was like, yeah. So anyway, we go to the airport and we're like in the American Express Club because I had a platinum American Express for the business. I mean, you just
Mhm.
run all your business stuff through it and then you get all this free stuff, right?
Yeah.
Like, and she was like, oh my gosh, people are actually talking to each other in here. I've never seen this. Like, people are like friendly. It's almost like they're networking. And then, yeah, we flew first class and she was like, I don't know if I'm ever going back. And so now it's funny because she has her Amex Platinum Club and she's always like running to the Amex Club. But it really does, it just changes. And I mean, you can find joy anywhere, but if you're looking to up level your business, that's where you're going to meet people. I just met the man, he was one of the producers on, oh my gosh, is it High School Musical? What was that super famous show? I don't watch TV. Anyway, he works for Disney. And then he was like, oh, you're new to Nashville? Call this person. They have an entrepreneur group. It's just like, it's
Amazing.
crazy the people you meet. Yeah.
It really is. It really is. I love that. Well, April, thank you so much for joining me today. I would love it if you could wrap up this episode by challenging the audience to do 3 things this week that can make their business move forward. So, anything that we talked about today or any advice that you have, just 3 action steps for the audience to take.
So the first one is going to sound counterintuitive, but I would put a color for pure joy on your calendar. And your first assignment is to make sure you have pure joy scheduled at least once a week. Again, we want to start small, right? You can build up, but whatever brings you pure joy, not your kids, not your significant other, not anyone else, like whatever makes you just like giggle like a child, right? So put one thing on your calendar for pure joy so that you can rest and renew, and make sure it has its own color. The second thing is think about a habit like I shared where I'm talking about my business to 5 people a day. What's something and seriously, it's a task at the top of my Google Calendar. So I love every day marking it complete, right? Like have some physical action you have to take. It might be crossing it off your planner, but one, set a habit that you do every work day that increases your business, and just start doing it. And guess what? If you miss a day, give yourself grace, but you got to do 10 the next day, right? Or you got to divide the 5 up and make them up the other day. So by Friday, you want to be caught up. And the third one is what I call 6 minutes to change your life. And it's where the first 2 minutes you wake up. So I'm a big fan of habit stacking. If you go straight to the coffee pot, great. You do it while you're getting your coffee, right? Connect it to something you already do. If you go wake your kids up first thing in the morning, do it as you're going to work your kids up. And, just grab your phone, put a timer on for 2 minutes. And if you're able to write and you like that, great. If not, just talk out loud or think. And for 2 minutes, you have to focus on everything you're excited about for the day and everything you're grateful for. That's all you're allowed to think about. And by the way, it's going to be really hard at the beginning because we humans are addicted to our negative thoughts and emotions, right? So you're reprogramming yourself. So if they come in, no big deal. Focus back on what you're excited about and what you're looking forward to and grateful for. At lunchtime, you're going to do the same thing. 2 minutes on the clock, and you're going to look back at the morning and talk about everything that went well. These are called your wins, right? And then before bed, do the same thing. And if you're married or you live with someone, isn't that an awesome conversation to have right before you go to bed? Hey, hon, here's everything that was amazing about my day. So basically, 2 minutes in the morning, 2 minutes at lunch, 2 minutes before you go to bed. You're just going to focus on gratitude and wins. And within 2 weeks, you become like manically happy, I like to say. Like you basically are like, oh my gosh, my life is so great. So it's really just rewiring yourself.
That's awesome. I love those tips. Do you have any resources to learn more about color blocking your schedule?
That's a great question. Yes, actually, on the Vixen Voice, if you go, you can find all my solo episodes on YouTube as well under Vixen Gathering, but you can go to Apple, Spotify. So I actually did an entire solo episode coaching on time management, and then I did a panel on time, energy, and confidence management. So there's 2 episodes that specifically talk about that. So that's free stuff. And then follow us on our email list because, I do a challenge a quarter. So this quarter it's on money mindset. Next quarter might be on time management. I've done that one as well before.
Okay, awesome. Perfect. I will put those in the show notes. And then where should people connect with you?
Awesome. They can connect with us at Vixen, Vixen, gathering.com. You can either subscribe to the podcast or sign up for our email list. And then on any social media, we're at Vixen Gathering.
Awesome. I will put all of those in the show notes. And last question I have for you, since I love talking about podcasts, all things podcasts, I would love to hear a little bit about your show and what it does for your business.
Thank you. So my show is called The Vixen Voice, and the reason I started it was as a financial advisor. I actually had a TV show and I went live on the morning show in Houston, but as a financial advisor, we're very highly regulated in what we can say and not say to large audiences, right? And my brother's still in the industry and has a great radio show and TV show. But one time we were filming TV together and we're like, we're so sick of this. We just want to talk about whatever we want to talk about, right? Because we're both very performance driven, spiritually driven, just a lot of things. So I knew when I started my new business, I was going to have a podcast or something so I could just talk about whatever I wanted. So, first reason is selfish. Second reason is I've been doing masterminds since 2012. And look, if you're listening, if my mastermind's not good for you, find one that is. Like, it's just so, it really helped me keep my sanity. And much of what I learned was through mentors in these masterminds and in these groups, right? And I would encourage you to go outside of your industry so you think outside of the box. Like, find a group that has people from multiple industries. But anyway, my experience was, part of the reason the Vixen Mastermind is all women is my mentors were always male because I was in the financial and legal world. And I mean, again, I learned a lot of wisdom from them. I love them. I was very close. But the conversation's just different when we have a room full of women. And I just, was on a podcast where a gentleman was interviewing. I was like, I mean, come on, when it's you and a bunch of guys, the conversation's different, right? And he was laughing and he was like, you're so right. So anyway, these mentors would take my ideas to build their brand, which great for them. But I just said, hey, if I'm in this position, I want to build my client. So I see my podcast as a win-win. I get to learn like from the guest, right? The guest gets promoted and our audience gets to learn. So I wanted to create like a win-win-win scenario. So to be honest, Haley, I didn't have marketing intentions. It was really just selfish and wanting to give a voice to other female entrepreneurs. And now we're like verging on the top 10% in podcast in 6 months. And all my guests are my ideal clients, so they end up becoming clients. So it's kind of fun. They're like become friends or clients. So now it's actually our leading marketing source. So we're getting a little more savvy. We always gift our guests. Again, that's just who I am. But, have a structure around your podcast because it is very bonding and you form a relationship with that person. And I always just say when I guest or have someone on, hey, could we spend 30 minutes networking and just see what you do and what I do and how we could help each other? And like these many people that I've been on their podcast or they've been on mine have become my best friends and important strategic business partners.
Absolutely. I love that. This is like what I love to hear because that's basically the same reason I started my podcast, just as like a networking connection type of activity rather than a income generating activity. And there's different ways to market different podcasts. Of course, some of my clients want their shows to generate their income, but just like you said, you started it with the right intentions, just to learn, connect with more people, and now it's generating income for you. So that is amazing.
Thank you.
Well, I've really enjoyed this conversation with you, April.
Yes, Haley, thank you so much. And thank you to everyone listening.